Before we get into today's episode, I want to thank a couple sponsors that we were able to secure for this season, season 5 of the Scuttlebutt. It's exciting to be able to get sponsors for this. We're really thankful for them. The first one, you might have heard them already, is D&D Metal Recycling and Auto Salvage. The Scuttlebutt's been pairing with D&D for quite some time. D&D began as a small hauling and used auto parts operation in the Pittsburgh area in the late 1970s and has grown into a full-service metal recycling company with 2 locations, Lawrenceville and Tarentum. These are state-of-the-art scrap yards with deep roots in the community and a strong commitment to the service of their customers. D&D accepts all types of metal, both ferrous and non-ferrous, that may be generated by industrial manufacturing, construction and demolition, small commercial entities, as well as individual customers. They have a wide variety of material handling equipment and are capable of managing any job in a timely and efficient manner. You can contact them for quotes and availability at D&D, that's D and D, autosalvage.com. Thank you, D&D, for supporting this podcast. Been wonderful collaborating with you, and we're looking forward to being with you all through season 5 here. We'd also like to thank a new sponsor for the Scuttlebutt, Tobacco-Free Adagio Health. Tobacco-Free Adagio Health is dedicated to preventing and reducing tobacco use and increasing education about tobacco hazards and secondhand smoke. Of course, the best way to be tobacco-free is to never start. And we'll be sharing more about the many programs offered by Tobacco-Free Adagio Health in the future. You can check out more of their work at tobaccofree.adagiohealth. It's ADAGIO health.org, tobaccofree.adagiohealth.org. Really excited to have sponsors on board for the Scuttlebutt, and I hope you enjoy this upcoming episode. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of The Scuttlebutt. I'm your host, Sean Hall, Director of Programming with the Veterans Breakfast Club. We're a nonprofit in Western PA whose mission is to create communities of listening around veterans and their stories to connect, educate, heal, and inspire. And what better way to honor Memorial Day is to listen to a veteran. That's what we're going to do today. We are inviting on Yari Villanueva from the organization Taps Across America. Yari is an Air Force veteran, and he started Taps Across America in 2020 to bring people together from across the country to play taps on Memorial Day. As a civilian myself, Memorial Day was kind of always that day where you just had a picnic, but it has a much, much deeper meaning to veterans. And I think it should have a much deeper meaning to all of us as civilians of the United States. We talk with Yari about his service, about Taps Across America, about what TAPS means to him, the history of TAPS. So I hope you enjoy this conversation, and I hope you find a way to honor, remember, and reflect to the people that gave the ultimate sacrifice on this Memorial Day. Thank you so much for watching and supporting the podcast, and enjoy the show. Yari, thank you so much for joining the Scuttlebutt today. I really appreciate you taking the time with us. I'd love for you to introduce yourself.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Hi, everyone. I'm Yari Villanueva. I'm the director of TAPS for Veterans. I am a retired military. I served in the United States Air Force Band for 23 years as a bugler at Arlington National Cemetery. Then I worked for about 10 years for the state of Maryland as the director of military funeral honors. And since my retirement, or second retirement, I've been working very hard with TAPS for Veterans, helping provide live buglers at military funerals around the country.
Wow. So 23 years in the Air Force, all as a bugler?
That's correct. With the Air Force Band, my duty was with the Air Force Ceremonial Brass, which is the ceremonial unit of the Air Force Band. Mm-hmm. Our main mission is to provide military funeral honors to the Air Force retirees and veterans and active duty at Arlington National Cemetery. That means, of course, providing the music that is played as they escort the caisson down to the gravesite, play the hymns as the casket is taken from the caisson up to the site, and of course, most importantly, providing a bugler to sound taps at the conclusion of the ceremony.
Before we get to TAPS, I'd like to hear, why did you decide to enlist, and what drove you to Air Force?
Well, you know, the Air Force is such a great organization. I've heard so much. And actually, as a kid, I remember watching the funerals for the Apollo 1 astronauts at Arlington National Cemetery. And I do remember very vividly that they played Abide With Me as they took the caskets of the two astronauts up to their final resting place. Mm-hmm. And I was just enamored by that. And as a kid growing up too, I had watched on television the funeral of John F. Kennedy. And those two major ceremonies really stuck with me. After I went to Peabody Conservatory to study music, I then taught in the schools for a while and then dropped out of teaching to get my master's at Kent State University. Mm-hmm. Then came back to Baltimore and auditioned for all the bands. And I was really just absolutely thrilled when the Air Force Band accepted me in 1985. Mm-hmm. And it was just, you know, a dream come true, being able to work with the finest musicians in the world and working on a mission that is very special to our veterans and of course to everyone involved in the Washington area, providing the music not only, you know, at the cemetery, but also providing the ceremonial music, so important at the White House for the special events there, playing arrival ceremonies at the Pentagon and the at Andrews Air Force Base, all important duty. And of course, those ceremonies really need to have music.
So that seems to me as a civilian is a very solemn thing to sort of be struck by as a kid and then to want to do that as your career. Do you know why those ceremonies really stuck with you and what made you want to pursue that?
Well, I can remember vividly as a kid, and I was 8 years old when the Kennedy assassination took place. Yeah. And I can remember vividly watching and seeing the caisson, seeing the troops march down, you know, up Pennsylvania Avenue to the Capitol, the solemn pageantry of the ceremonies at Arlington National Cemetery, and of course the buglers sounding taps. You know, and that, as it turned out to be, the first time taps had been heard on such a worldwide stage. Mm-hmm. And that really struck me. And then, of course, in 1967, you know, 4 years later, watching that ceremony on television for the Apollo 1 astronauts. Yeah. And I've always been interested in the ceremonial aspect of the military. And you know, I was really drawn to it. Mm-hmm. I was really, really excited to be accepted by the band.
Did you come from a military family?
My father actually had served during World War II. Mm-hmm. He was a merchant marine. And actually, we just passed a very important anniversary in his military life. Mm-hmm. He was a seaman aboard Liberty ships. He served on 4 different Liberty ships during World War II. The very first ship he served on was the SS Mckeesport. He had just enlisted in March of 1943. On April 29th, 1943, the Mckeesport was sunk, torpedoed by a German U-boat. Out of all the crew that got to the water, all of them except for one was saved. My father was, of course, one of the fortunate ones that was able to jump into the water. He actually grabbed his trunk and threw the ship's cat into the trunk before going into the water.
Wow.
So he survived that. And every year on April 29th, the city of Mckeesport holds a special ceremony to honor the memory of those merchant seamen who really did an important duty during World War I. So I'm very proud of my dad's service. And I guess that rubbed off on me a little bit. My father actually wanted me to become a civilian engineer, but I found a bigger calling in music. And then being able to go into the military and combine those two things was like a dream come true.
And when you went in, there's this, you know, you had a long service of just sort of commitment to remembrance of the fallen, of honoring veterans. And I want to get to that idea a little bit later. But first, let's talk about TAPS. And now TAPS for Veterans, TAPS across America, the organizations you are currently running. But let's focus in on just the history of TAPS specifically. It is a solemn song. You know, it's played at funerals. for fallen of the military. But where did it start and how long has it been around?
Well, the call itself has been around since July of 1862. And interestingly enough, the call of taps is the only call in our military manual that's played slowly throughout. And it actually has two different reasons for its existence. The first one is originally how the call came about was the signal lights out. It turned out that a Union general by the name of Daniel Butterfield, who was from Utica, New York, was the commander of a brigade. And just following the 7 days battle in June of 1862, the Union Army fell back to the shores of the James River just south of Richmond. And it was there that General Butterfield heard the regulation call of extinguished lights. And he did not like that very much. He thought it was just too formal of a call to play at the end of the day. He wanted something a little more somber sounding, a little more slower. So he reached into his memory and dredged up an old bugle call that had gone out of use prior to the Civil War. And he took that bugle call and chopped off most of it, just took the last 6 measures and rewrote it into the 24 notes that we know today as taps. Mm-hmm. He called his brigade bugler, a 23-year-old by the name of Oliver Wilcox Norton, called him into his tent this evening in July, and together they worked it out. He would play the call for him, and Butterfield would make suggestions about stretching a note out or making it a little shorter. And he instructed Norton to play that call that evening in place of the regulation extinguished lights, which Norton did. The next day, he was approached by other buglers from other brigades asking, what was that you played? And Norton said it was the new call that the general had come up with, and he furnished copies of it to the other buglers. And pretty soon, everyone's playing this new call. So the call originally began as the call to extinguish lights, to be played at night, to say lights out, and for the guards to post their duty. It's a little bit later that it becomes associated with military funerals, when it's sounded at a funeral for a cannoneer, whose commander thought it would be might be dangerous to fire off the traditional 3 volleys. So because the enemy was so close, so he decided, have the bugler just play this new call. Yeah. So by the end of the Civil War, and then as we get to the latter part of the 19th century, taps becomes more and more associated with, not only extinguished lights, but also becoming the call sounded at funerals, and then later on at memorial services, as memorial services start happening in the wake of the Civil War. It's kind of interesting that the U.S. Army first publishes the music for taps in 1874 when they revised the infantry manual, but they don't call it taps, they call it extinguished lights, because that's what it's supposed to be. So for the next 2 decades, it's used that way as extinguished lights and played unofficially at military funerals. Finally, in 1891, it takes the Army a little while to catch up on things. A little while. The Army finally recognizes the call and puts it into the manual as the title of taps, along with information that the call is to be sounded after 3 volleys are fired at a military funeral. So since then, it has become our call at military funerals. It's also used at memorial services, wreath ceremonies. And a couple of years ago, we were able to get Congress to recognize it as our national song of remembrance.
And where did the name specifically taps come from? Was it originally when they were in the tent figuring it out, and that's what they titled it?
That's a great question. One of the questions I get a lot. The title for the tune comes from 3 drum taps. Before taps, when the call of extinguished lights was sounded back before taps was written, when the call of extinguished lights would go, a lone drummer on the parade field would hit the drum 3 times. That was the drum signal for extinguished lights. And so soldiers would call that the drum taps. In fact, I believe there's a book called Drum Taps in Dixie, which is about the drum tap, the 3 beats, which means, go to sleep. When the new bugle call starts to replace that drum beat, soldiers naturally call it taps. So the word, or the title, actually derives from a drum beat.
Wow. And it's so uniquely American, taps, that does any other country have something like this, a call, something they play at their military funerals?
Oh, absolutely. Militaries around the world have calls, of course, their bugle calls similar to ours: a call to wake up, a call to summon the officers, a call to go to breakfast. And in the evening, they have the call of tattoo, which means it's the last roll call of the day. They also have a call in the evening to go to sleep. Countries also have a call to honor the dead. In the United Kingdom and all Commonwealth countries, that call is called the last post. It's a much longer call, and it's usually traditionally followed by a moment of silence, followed by the rouse, or the reveille, or reveille, as they like to pronounce it. In Italy, there's a call called Il Silencio, and that is played in the evening to signal go to sleep. And that call is kind of interesting because the first couple notes sounds a little like our taps, which has led a lot of people to believe that Il Silencio and taps are the same, but it's not. They're different calls, but they have the same purpose. There are other countries. In fact, I just did a article about bugle calls in the Ukrainian army, since Ukraine has been on our mind recently. They have a special call for the burial of their soldiers. And I've also put that up on my website. So the other countries do have a way of honoring their soldiers. Interestingly enough, Germany doesn't use a bugle call. They use a trumpet player playing a tune called My Comrade. It's a very lovely little tune. And then, of course, the French use a bugle call. And my French is awful, and it's terrible. So I'll spell it. It's AUXMORTS, more, I think, which means the dead. And that call is sounded at their military funerals and their wreath ceremony. So yes, long answer to your question. Other countries do have bugle signals, but taps is certainly unique to our country.
Does Scotland use bagpipes, or Ireland?
That I'm not sure, because my main interest is bugles.
Bugle specifically.
That's who I'm on the bagpipe world. So,
through your long service in this commitment and serving at Arlington, I would feel like, as a civilian, if I had to go every day to play taps and be a part of these funerals, that would be kind of depressing, just to be honest. How do you continue the work and continue to serve, but also continue to feel like this is something that means something, and be, I guess, stay positive through those many years?
Well, to the families that come to Arlington to say farewell to their loved ones, they're going to see so much. They're going to see the soldiers, the airmen, the Marines, doing their thing in their ceremonial uniform. They're going to remember the firing party. They're going to remember the caisson, but they're really going to remember taps, how that was sounded at the conclusion of the ceremony. That sound will always be with them. And it's so important to us military buglers to make sure that we sound that call as perfectly as possible. Doing it day after day, of course, can be quite emotional because you see very close the families, the grieving. You see the chaplains going through the ceremony. You see how they're holding the flag so solemnly, tightly, and then the folding of it, and it can affect you. And the way we deal with it, at least for me, is that I tend to step back a little bit, not try to get involved with every military funeral. I know every one of those funerals is so special and so important. I try not to get too involved, because if excuse me, if you become involved with each single one, you won't last more than a month doing it. So we like to step back just a little bit and do our job as the best way we can, and knowing that that is the thing that the families are going to remember.
This is a very big month for you, Memorial Day coming up. Obviously, honoring and remembering, reflecting on those who gave the ultimate sacrifice. And, you only just started this organization, Taps for Veterans, Taps Across America, in 2020. So it's very new, but it's gaining a lot of traction and it's blossoming very quickly. But can you talk to me about what led you to start the organization?
Sure. Well, we started Taps for Veterans back around 2012 when we saw the need of having an organization that could help provide live buglers at military funerals. Our organization, that's our #1 mission for Taps for Veterans, being able to provide that service to our families. The other thing that we do, and I think we do very well, is that we sponsor major events during the year, and we're partnered with other organizations to help spread the word, helping provide buglers. For example, every year we have buglers who come for the 100 Nights of Taps in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, where a bugler will sound taps every night between Memorial Day and Labor Day. That all volunteers who come, everybody, we never have the same bugler twice. It's amazing. We opened up registration in mid-March, and within 2 weeks, all the dates were filled. Everyone loves doing that.
Yeah.
We also partner with the Doughboy Foundation to provide a live bugler every single day at the World War I Memorial in Washington, D.C. That bugler will sound the call at 5 p.m. dressed in a doughboy uniform. We've also had large ceremonies. We commemorated the 150th anniversary of Taps in 2012. In 2013, we commemorated the 50th anniversary of the sounding of taps at the funeral of John F. Kennedy. And that has a very special story in itself. We do ceremonies every year on Veterans Day to honor the tomb of the unknown soldier, and other events that come up. And of course, the big one, Taps Across America, which interestingly enough, we started back in 2015, not 2020.
Okay.
Yeah. In 2015, I came up with the idea of Taps Across America as a program that would help spread, the idea of taps all around the country. So that's why Taps Across America. And so we got the website going. We had the Twitter page and the Facebook page set up. So that was going along for a while until 2020 when it went ballistic, sort of.
Everything shut down. So, this was a great way to reconnect everybody, right?
Exactly. In fact, that was the big reason why it took off. Unfortunately, because of the cancellation of all those Memorial Day ceremonies in May of 2020, people were wondering, well, what can we do to honor our veterans? And I came up with the idea, why don't we use the national pause for remembrance, which is done at 3 o'clock on Memorial Day. Now, Congress had passed that back, I think, around the year 2000, where it encouraged Americans, wherever they were, you be at your picnic, you've done your ceremony in the morning, but you're spending family time or doing something in the afternoon, just to take 1 minute and just pause and reflect on the sacrifices of our military, to those who who gave their lives in service to our country, and also to remember those who are still serving. And I thought, what a great idea. Why don't we do this at 3 o'clock? And then we got partnered with CBS, which gave us a big, much more national exposure. And it just ballooned from there.
And so, TAPS is specifically on Memorial Day, it's 3 p.m. But is there another time that it can happen, 3 p.m. or 5 p.m., or is congressionally it's supposed to happen at 3 p.m.?
Well, yes, 3 p.m. local time.
Okay, so wherever you're at, as long as it's 3 p.m., that's when we play TAPS.
Correct. That's correct. So 3 p.m. wherever you are, and so it's actually kind of neat to watch it, because on the East Coast, 3 o'clock, and then we'll start seeing the videos and photographs start pouring in, and then as it moves across the country. So for the next 4 hours, it's so cool just to watch the videos and seeing the responses and people posting up on Facebook about their experiences. It really is. It really warms the heart, and it just makes me so proud of the folks that go out and do this.
And I'm going to bring up a map here of, it's all across the country that you have had people volunteer to play TAPS. It's on your website. I'm going to put the links here in the description, so you can, people that might want to chime in on Twitter or check out your Facebook page can do that on Memorial Day and watch as TAPS is played across America. How do people volunteer for this?
Well, they can go to either website. The best website, of course, is tapsacrossamerica.org. Or you can put .com or .net. It'll take you right there. And the button for registration is right in the middle of the page. It's so easy to sign up. And
it's
once
free?
you sign, it's free. Yeah, we don't charge anything for this. And basically, it's nice to have a record of who's doing what. And what we do also, of course, as you mentioned, we have a Google map where if you look on the website, you'll see all the little blue dots where someone is performing, at 3 o'clock on Memorial Day. It's wonderful that we not only include buglers and trumpeters and people who play cornet, but we've opened it up to other instruments too. The first year that we did this, I got a lot of emails from people asking, well, I play clarinet, or I play saxophone or trombone. Can I be involved with this too?
Yeah.
And after thinking about it, I said, well, why not? TAPS has become such an American piece of music, something that means, it's so important to us. And for this one time, for this moment of remembrance, I thought it would be appropriate, whatever instrument you play, or if you just want to go out and sing, sing the words to it, that's fine. Of course, having a bugle or trumpet at a military funeral, that's what you use. But for something like this, where we want to include as many Americans as possible, I think it's appropriate. You
said the words. Are there words to TAPS, or are you meaning like humming the tune?
There are words. The most famous one, of course, is day is done, gone the sun, from the lake, from the hill, from the sky, all is well, safely rest, God is nigh. Words were actually were associated with bugle calls ever since bugle calls were invented. The one we all know, I can't get them up, I can't get them up, I can't get them up in the morning. And soupy for breakfast call. Well, as soon as TAPS was first sounded in those Union camps, soldiers started singing words to it, go to sleep, go to sleep, go to sleep, basically were the first words. And then in the latter part of the 19th century, people actually started writing lyrics. And I have a collection of about 24 lyrics to the music. And still people are still writing things today. And it's really wonderful.
And any age, any instrument then can be a part of this?
Absolutely. We've had violinists, bassoonists, trombone players, piano players. We had an electric guitar the other year.
Well, it kind of reminds me of, was it Jimi Hendrix? It's one of the most famous electric guitar renditions, if not the most famous electric guitar rendition.
That's correct. Yes,
Yeah.
and right in the middle of it, in the middle of that Star Spangled Banner rendition, he plays taps on his guitar.
Oh yeah. It gives
Yeah,
you chills just thinking about it.
yeah, and, because he did serve in the 101st Airborne Division.
Mm-hmm.
He was a paratrooper,
Right.
and so my thought is perhaps he was doing it as a salute to his brothers, who he served with. It's quite an interesting rendition for
Definitely.
sure.
I think of, when we're talking about this, think of like the time that I've spent overseas, or I went to London several years ago, and I've always felt like you are steeped in history when you walk through London. You can see the ceremonies happening, wherever you go. There's such history there, it's, centuries old. And you always come back to America and you feel kind of like, we're a country where we kind of like, tear that down and build a new thing, and tear that down and build a new thing. So it's exciting to know that someone like yourself is still keeping history alive. And what does that mean to you to continue on this legacy, and to also pass that down as America continues to move forward?
Well, we have traditions in our country. We haven't been around as long as European nations,
Mm-hmm.
but we have developed a lot of our own traditions. And of course, a lot of these traditions are rooted in the European tradition.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of good to keep those things going and going strong. Like the idea of having some sort of formal ceremony at a funeral, a way of honoring that person is so important. When the reason for having a ceremony is to honor a person or to honor a certain thing. And there's a certain routine that's involved with it, and with certain protocols that are specified for how you do things, like the way you present flags at a ceremony. There's a protocol for that. Mm-hmm. How you perform the national anthem, there's a protocol for that. Even though in our great country, we've learned that interpreting the national anthem has become a new thing. Mm-hmm. But there are protocols for that. There's also protocols for the sounding of taps, protocols for how you fold the flag, how it's presented to the family, mm-hmm. Things like that. And these are all rooted in tradition. There's a reason why you fire 3 volleys instead of 20 or 30 or 40. There's a reason why you have taps. There's a reason why the flag is folded in such a way. There's a reason why flags are set up on a pedestal in a certain order. And those are all part of traditions. And traditions are the things. Traditions are like the glue that helps keep our nation together.
What do you think, with Memorial Day coming up, what does Memorial Day mean to you?
Well, Memorial Day to me, of course, honors those who've made that sacrifice. Mm-hmm. Those men and women who have put their lives on the line to make a sacrifice so that our nation will be able to continue. If you can only think about, those 18, 19, and 20-year-old soldiers who stormed the beach at Omaha on June 6, 1944, the sacrifices that they made. We have to honor that. We have to remember their sacrifices. We have to remember every man and woman who's put on a military uniform and put their life on the line. And in some cases, writing a check or that we have to cash. And it's such an honor to do that. And so I like to think of that. And of course, personally speaking, I think of my friends, my family, who served, who've put on that uniform. It just, we want to honor, we want to respect, and above all, we want to remember.
You've played taps and have heard taps played any number of times, infinite number of times at this point in your life. What do you still think of when you hear it?
It's interesting. of course, when the event happens, I try to concentrate on making sure that I get every single note right. But I always think of, Corinthians, the Bible verse about, um, I shall tell you a great mystery, that we shall all be changed in a moment at the sound of the last trumpet. For the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible. That Bible verse always comes back to me as I play the call, because I know that it's almost a sacred thing, a very solemn honor that we do, and we want to do it correctly. Yeah. And so I think about that, and I always try to think about, that person that we're honoring at that moment, knowing that that person has devoted a part of, his or her life in service to our country. Not every person that we sound taps for has died in combat. They may have done a very honorable career, and retired, or a lot of them, they've only served 2 or 3 years, but it's been done honorably. They've given up a portion of their life, in service to our country. So that taps is going to be special for them. But I think of, that, and I also think of that Bible verse when I play.
You continuing to serve, even though you've left the Air Force, you have this long history of service. When you reflect upon that service, can you share some wisdom of what you've learned over those many years?
Well, wow. The wisdom I have is, I don't know. I say just always keep pressing on. Don't let things get you down. 23 years, of course, was wonderful, but of course it wasn't without, its ups and downs at times, and you have to learn how to weather the storms through your career. It's not going to be all roses every single day through the military career, but if you learn to pace yourself and to deal with things, it'll work out. And then I was really blessed with not only being able to serve my country on the federal level, but also when I retired, I was able to go and work for the state of Maryland as a civilian director of military funeral honors for the state. My direct boss was the adjutant general for the state of Maryland, who reported directly to the governor. So my chain of command was rather short. Right. I also, for 8 years, served in the Maryland Defense Force, which is the militia of Maryland. Not many people know this, but there are many states throughout the nation that not only have a National Guard, but they also have a state militia, a defense force, which is made up of volunteers. And they are authorized to wear military uniforms, and they work under the auspices of the National Guard. So I was able to work with that organization as the band director for the Maryland Defense Force. Some really great folks working with that, and also being able to continue sounding taps at military funerals. And so I'm basically retired from the state militia also at the rank of lieutenant colonel. So I've got 2 military retirements, but the state one, the militia, of course, was a volunteer organization.
I also did not know about state militias, and I think that's going to be, I'm going to make another Scuttlebutt episode about state militias, because that's really interesting. I've not heard of that.
They're really important because they're made up of, like, in the state of Maryland, we have doctors and lawyers and engineers who are willing to step up and assist the National Guard at times. And they do a great service to the state of Maryland. And it's all free. Can you imagine that? These are volunteers.
Yeah.
They step up, and they're willing to provide their professional expertise to the state.
Definitely going to look in more into that. How can someone donate to Taps for Veterans or Taps Across America?
Thanks. That's a really great question. Well, people wonder with, nonprofit organizations, you have a lot of volunteers and stuff. Yeah, that's true. But we have bills. The IT bills that we have are quite expensive because just the mechanism for having the bugle request system was quite expensive to put together because it had to be like handmade for this. We also have mailing costs when we send out things. We have a media consultant that we're working with. Also a lawyer who's been great with providing pro bono services, but of course there are other charges that we have to pay for. But so it's great to have people, if they can support us, we'd love it. They can go to our website, tapsforveterans.org, and right there's a button for donations. And also if you go onto the Taps Across America, there's also a donation button there too. And we are a nonprofit organization, or you can just go to, you can pay through PayPal and donate that way. It's very exciting that we get a lot of support around this time of year. Definitely. And another organization, speaking of donation, with Taps Across America this year, we are partnering with Fleet Farm Stores. It's a chain of stores in the Midwest. They have 47 stores, and we are providing a bugler at each one of their locations for their 3 o'clock ceremony on Memorial Day. I think it's absolutely wonderful for a major chain to sponsor having a bugler there for their special little moment of remembrance. And they have decided to help us out and support us, which is wonderful. And we thank you, Fleet Farms. Check out the closest Fleet Farm if you live out there in the Midwest. They are wonderful and they've been really good to us.
We'll make sure to put a link to them also in our description.
Great.
Yari, this has been highly educational, very inspirational. Thank you for helping us complete our mission by talking with us about your service and the organizations. I'm sure during Memorial Day, this coming Memorial Day, I know that in looking at your map, they are doing several bugles right around my area. So I hope that I step out and hear somebody playing at 3 p.m. I know I'll use that time to, like you say, our website says, honor, remember, and reflect on those who gave the ultimate sacrifice. I really appreciate your time coming on, and thank you for joining us.
It's my honor. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And for those of you listening to the Scuttlebutt, if you have any reactions to this episode, please like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell on YouTube. Or you can send me an email at Shaun, SHAUN, at veteransbreakfastclub.org. I'd be very excited to hear from you. And I will see you all on a future episode of the Scuttlebutt.